The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly in Willow Creek, painting the dusty main street in shades of amber and rust. It was the kind of heat that made the air shimmer like water, the kind that drove sensible folk indoors. But today, near every soul in town had gathered around the auction platform, drawn by whispers of something unprecedented. Samuel Hayes pulled his wagon to a stop at the general store, intending only to collect the month's supplies. At 32, he cut a solitary figure, tall, weathered by sun and sorrow, with hands scarred from years of honest work. The Triple Creek Ranch had been his life for the past decade, ever since Mary's fever took her and their unborn child. He'd learned to find peace in the rhythm of seasons and the quiet companionship of horses. The commotion from the town square caught his attention, against his better judgment. He tied his team and walked toward the crowd. What he saw made him stop cold. On the platform stood a young woman, maybe 25, her wrists bound with rope. Wild auburn hair fell in tangled waves past her shoulders, and her green eyes blazed with fury that couldn't be dimmed by captivity. She wore a torn calico dress, feet bare and dusty, but it was her stance that struck him most. Chin raised, shoulders back, meeting every gaze with defiance. "Gentlemen, what we have here is a rare opportunity," the auctioneer bellowed, mopping his brow with a yellowed kerchief. "This here wild girl was caught stealing from farms up north. No family to speak of, no one to claim her. The judge says she can work off her debt to society. We'll start the bidding at $20. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Women clutched their shawls tighter, while men exchanged knowing looks. Samuel's jaw tightened. He'd seen plenty of cruelty in his years, but this, selling a human being like livestock, turned his stomach. 25, Bull Morrison's voice boomed from the front. The owner of the Double M Ranch was everything Samuel despised. Crude, violent, with appetites that ran toward cruelty. His thick fingers gripped a coiled whip at his belt. The woman on the platform spat in Morrison's direction. "I belong to no one," she declared, her voice carrying an accent Samuel couldn't quite place. "Not to you. Not to any man who thinks he can buy me." Morrison laughed, a sound like rocks grinding. $30 for the Hellcat. I'll teach her manners soon enough." Samuel watched the woman's fingers curl into fists despite her bonds. He saw the calculation in her eyes, not fear, but the measured look of someone planning their next move. It reminded him of a Mustang he'd once found caught in barbed wire, wild-eyed but unbroken. 40, someone else called. 50, Morrison countered, already moving toward the platform like she was his. The words left Samuel's mouth before he could stop them. $100. The square fell silent. Every head turned to stare at the quiet rancher who rarely came to town, who kept to himself since his wife's passing. Morrison's face darkened to the color of old leather. Well, Sam Hayes wants to play," Morrison sneered. 110. 200. Samuel's voice remained steady, though inside he wondered what possessed him. That was half a year's profit, money meant for winter feed and repairs. The auctioneer's eyes widened. $200. Going once. Morrison's hand moved to his gun belt, then thought better of it with so many witnesses. "She ain't worth it," he spat. "But mark my words, Hayes, that wild thing will gut you in your sleep." Going twice. Sold to Mr. Samuel Hayes. As Samuel approached the platform, the woman tensed like a cornered wolf. Up close, he could see the bruises on her arms, the defiant tilt of her chin that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion in her eyes. "I told you," she said as he counted out the bills. "I belong to no one. You've wasted your money." Samuel met her gaze evenly. "Never said you belonged to me, but right now, leaving you here seemed worse than the alternative." The sheriff cut her bonds, keeping his hand on his pistol. "She's your responsibility now, Hayes. Any trouble she causes is on your head." Samuel nodded, then turned to the woman. "My wagon's by the store. You can ride in the back if you prefer, Or up front, your choice. She studied him for a long moment, this quiet man who just paid a fortune for her freedom. And if I run, then you run. He started walking toward his wagon, not looking back to see if she followed. The crowd parted before them, whispers trailing in their wake. Elena, for that was her name, though she hadn't told him yet, stood frozen for a heartbeat. She could bolt now, disappear into the hills. But something in the man's manner, the way he'd said, your choice, like he meant it, made her take one step, then another. At the wagon, Samuel loaded his supplies, then gestured to the bench seat. Sun's getting low. It's a 3-hour ride to the ranch. She climbed up stiffly, perching on the edge like she might leap at any moment. As they rolled out of town, neither spoke. The wheels kicked up dust that turned golden in the slanted light. And somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried. "Why?" she finally asked as Willow Creek faded behind them. Samuel considered his words carefully. My wife used to say every creature deserves a chance to choose its own path, even the wild ones, especially the wild ones. Elena turned to study his profile, the weathered lines, the old sadness in his eyes, the steady hands on the reins. And if I choose to kill you and steal your horse, then I reckon I misjudged you. He glanced at her briefly. But I don't think I have. She laughed then, a sound like breaking glass. You know nothing about me. I know you didn't flinch when Morrison bid on you. Know you kept your dignity up on that platform when most would have begged. Know you're weighing your options right now instead of acting on panic. He adjusted his hat against the setting sun. That tells me enough. They rode in silence after that, the landscape shifting from town buildings to open range. Elena had spent 7 years in the wilderness. 7 years of freedom hard won after escaping from men who'd tried to own her before. Now here she was, riding toward another cage, another man who thought he could tame her. But Samuel Hayes hadn't tied her hands, hadn't threatened or leered or made promises about breaking her spirit. He'd simply offered her a choice and meant it. As the sun painted the sky in shades of blood and gold, Elena made her decision. She would go to this ranch, learn what she could, wait for her moment. And if this quiet man proved false, well, she still had the knife hidden in her boot, the one they'd missed when they caught her. Elena, she said suddenly, my name is Elena. Samuel nodded, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. Pleased to meet you. Elena, welcome to whatever comes next. The wagon rolled on through the gathering dusk, carrying 2 damaged souls toward a destiny neither could foresee. Behind them, the sun died in spectacular fashion, and ahead, the first stars began their ancient watch. The prairie stretched endless before them, painted silver by moonlight. Samuel had expected Elena to attempt escape within the first hour, but she remained on the wagon seat, alert as a hunting cat. When they stopped to water the horses at Copper Creek, he wordlessly handed her the reins while he filled the canteens. You're either very foolish or very clever, Elena said, weighing the leather straps in her hands. Maybe both. Samuel secured the water jugs. Trail gets rough ahead. There's a blanket under the seat if you're cold. She wasn't cold. 7 years in the wilderness had taught her to endure worse than a cool evening. But the gesture puzzled her. Men who bought women at auction didn't typically concern themselves with comfort. 2 hours into the journey, Samuel pulled off the main trail. We'll camp here tonight. Ranch is still an hour off, but the horses need rest. Elena tensed. Here it would come, the real reason he'd bought her. Her hand drifted toward her hidden knife. But Samuel simply unhitched the team, his movements efficient and calm. He built a fire in a circle of stones, pulled supplies from the wagon, and laid out 2 bedrolls on opposite sides of the flames. When he handed her a plate of beans and biscuits, she almost dropped it in surprise. Not poisoned, he said dryly, taking a bite of his own meal to prove it. They ate in silence, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Samuel spoke. That knife in your boot, keep it, but if you're planning to use it on me, I'd appreciate warning enough to finish my coffee first." Elena's eyes widened. "How did you—" "The way you walk. Saw the same careful step in a Comanche scout once." He refilled his cup from the pot. "Like I said, keep it. World's dangerous enough without being defenseless." After cleaning the dishes, Samuel banked the fire and settled into his bedroll. Ranch house has a spare room. Lock on the inside, not the outside. You're free to come and go as you please. Though I'd appreciate help with chores in exchange for board. "And if I leave tonight?" He tilted his hat over his eyes. "Then I'll have an interesting story about the most expensive night's camping I ever did." Elena lay awake long after his breathing deepened into sleep. Once, she rose silently, moved to where the horses were picketed. The bay mare whickered softly, nuzzling her palm. Freedom beckoned in every direction, north to the mountains, south to Mexico, east to the forests she knew so well. But something held her. Maybe it was exhaustion from running. Maybe curiosity about this strange man who bought her freedom only to offer more. Or maybe it was the memory of his words, "Welcome to whatever comes next." She returned to her bedroll, knife within reach, and dozed fitfully until dawn. Samuel woke to find her adding wood to the fire, coffee already brewing. "Figured you'd be halfway to Colorado by now," he said, stretching. "Your coffee pot's too good to steal. Decided to wait for something more valuable." Was that almost a smile? Samuel couldn't tell. They broke camp efficiently, working with the wordless coordination of those who understood labor. The Triple Creek Ranch appeared with the morning sun, a modest main house, solid barn, several corrals, and a bunkhouse. Dogs ran out barking, followed by 3 men who stopped short at the sight of Elena. "Boys," Samuel said easily. "This is Elena. She'll be staying on, helping with the work. Elena, meet Tom, Billy, and Miguel." Tom, the eldest at maybe 50, touched his hat politely. Billy, young and eager, stared openly until Miguel elbowed him. The Mexican vaquero studied Elena with knowing eyes, recognizing perhaps a fellow outsider. "Ma'am," Tom said carefully. "Welcome to Triple Creek." Elena nodded stiffly, unused to courtesy. As the men dispersed to their work, Samuel showed her to the house. It was clean, simple, with touches that spoke of a woman's hand now years faded. Curtains at the windows, dried flowers in a vase, a quilt across the settee. "Your room." He opened a door to reveal a small but clean space with a bed, washstand, and chest of drawers, as promised. A bolt lock gleamed on the inside of the door. "Privy's out back, pumps in the kitchen, dinner's at sunset." He left her then, and Elena found herself alone for the first time in days. She tested the lock, examined the window easily opened from inside, and finally sat on the bed. It had been 7 years since she'd slept under a roof by choice. The first week passed in careful navigation. Elena worked harder than any hired hand hauling water, splitting wood, mending fences. She spoke little but watched everything, learning the rhythm of the ranch, the personalities of its inhabitants. Tom treated her with grandfatherly kindness. Billy's awe gradually shifted to camaraderie as she proved herself capable. Miguel, after watching her calm a spooked horse with barely a whisper, declared in Spanish that she had the gift. Samuel maintained respectful distance, but she felt his quiet observation. He never demanded, never questioned. When she appeared at breakfast, he nodded. When she took her plate to eat alone by the corral, he said nothing. When she worked until her hands bled, he left salve by her door without comment. It was the horses that finally bridged the gap between them. A string of wild mustangs had been brought in, and the men were struggling with a particularly difficult mare. She was magnificent, black as midnight, with eyes that promised violence to anyone who tried to mount her. "She'll have to be put down," Tom said reluctantly after Billy's 3rd unsuccessful attempt left him limping. "Too wild. Danger to everyone." "Let me try," Elena said quietly. The men exchanged glances. Samuel studied her thoughtfully. "Your choice." Elena entered the corral slowly, speaking in a language none of them recognized. Not Spanish or English, but something older, melodic. The mare's ears pricked forward. For 20 minutes. Elena simply stood there, talking, until the horse took one tentative step forward, then another. By evening, the mare was eating from Elena's hand. "How?" Billy asked in amazement. Elena shrugged. "She knows what it is to be caged. I promised her she wouldn't be broken, only partnered." That night at dinner, she ate with the men for the first time. The conversation was stilted at first, then gradually warmed. When Miguel told a joke in Spanish, Elena surprised them all by laughing. "You speak Spanish?" Samuel asked. "Spanish, Italian, some Comanche. You learn what you need to survive." After the others retired, Samuel found her by the corral, watching the mustangs. "That mare, she's yours if you want her. No obligations. Just seems right, is all." Elena turned to him, moonlight catching the uncertainty in her eyes. "Why are you doing this, the room, the freedom, now this?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "My wife, Mary, she used to say people were like horses. Push too hard, you break their spirit. Give them space to choose. And sometimes they choose to stay." He paused. "I'm not looking to tame you. Elena, world's got too few wild things left as it is." That night, Elena stood at her window watching the stars. For 7 years, they'd been her only constant companions. Now, for the first time, 4 walls didn't feel like a prison. The lock on her door didn't mock her, but protected her. The men's acceptance didn't demand her transformation. She thought of Samuel's words, of the mare in the corral, of choices freely made. Tomorrow, she could leave. The next day, too. But tonight, for the first time in memory, she wasn't planning escape routes. Tonight, she was almost home. The sandstorm arrived without mercy on a Tuesday afternoon. Elena first noticed the horses' restlessness, the way they bunched together in the corral, ears flat against their skulls. The sky had turned an ominous yellow-brown, and the air itself seemed to thicken with each passing minute. "Storm coming," Miguel announced, bursting into the barn where Elena was mending tack. "Big one. We need all hands." Within minutes, the ranch exploded into organized chaos. Tom and Billy drove the cattle toward the sheltered valley, while Samuel and Miguel secured anything that could become a projectile. Elena helped herd the horses into the barn, her black mare following without need of a lead rope. "Elena," Samuel shouted over the rising wind, "help me with the chicken coop. We need to—" His words were swallowed by a wall of sand that hit like a physical force. The world disappeared into a howling brown nightmare. Elena felt the wind trying to tear her from the ground, sand scouring any exposed skin like tiny knives. She lost sight of Samuel, of the barn, of everything beyond arm's length. The sensible thing would be to drop to the ground, find shelter, wait it out. Instead, she thought of the chickens, of how Samuel had run toward them despite the danger. Fighting against the wind, she stumbled forward, using the fence line as a guide. The chicken coop materialized from the gloom just as she heard a crash. The door had been torn off, and the terrified birds were scattering into the storm. Elena dove for the coop, managing to grab several hens and stuff them back inside. Samuel appeared like a ghost, blood on his forehead where flying debris had caught him. Together, they wrestled a piece of lumber across the opening, then another, while sand filled their mouths and eyes. "The barn," Samuel pointed, but Elena could barely see his hand, let alone the building. They linked arms, stumbling blindly in what they hoped was the right direction. The wind shrieked like something alive and hungry. Elena's foot caught on something, a water trough, maybe, and she went down hard. The wind immediately tried to roll her like tumbleweed. Samuel's grip on her arm was the only thing that kept her from being swept away. Then Suddenly, blessed stillness. They'd stumbled into the barn's lee side, finding the door more by memory than sight. Once inside, they collapsed against the wall, coughing sand from their lungs. "You all right?" Samuel managed between gasps. Elena nodded, then realized he couldn't see her in the darkness. "Yes, your head. Just a scratch." He felt around until he found a lantern, struck a match with shaking hands. In the flickering light, they looked like they'd been rolled in flower hair, skin, clothes all the same dusty brown. Despite everything, Elena found herself laughing. "What?" Samuel asked, and she saw he was almost smiling too. "We look like ghosts. Feel like one too." He pressed a bandana to the cut on his forehead. "That was foolish, going after those chickens." "Then why did you—" He shrugged. "They're my responsibility. Ranch doesn't work if we only protect what's easy." The storm raged for 3 more hours. Tom and Billy made it back, having barely gotten the cattle to safety. Miguel arrived last, leading a string of horses he'd found running blind. They all huddled in the barn, humans and animals together, while the world outside tried to tear itself apart. Elena found herself pressed between Samuel and the black mare, drawing comfort from both. At some point, exhaustion won, and she dozed against Samuel's shoulder. She woke to stillness and embarrassment, pulling away quickly. But Samuel was already up, surveying the damage through the barn door. The ranch looked like it had been picked up and shaken. Fences down, roof shingles scattered, everything coated in inches of sand. "Well," Tom said philosophically, "least we're all breathing." The cleanup took days. Elena threw herself into the work with fierce determination, as if she could repair more than just fences. It was while clearing sand from the well that Samuel found her, late on the 3rd day. "You don't have to prove anything," he said quietly. "No one doubts your place here." "I'm not trying to prove—" She stopped, realizing she was lying. "In the storm, when I couldn't see, when I thought I'd be blown away, you held on." Of course I did." "No." She turned to face him fully. "Not of course. For 7 years. I survived because I trusted no one, needed no one. But in that storm," she struggled for words, "depending on someone else is harder than being alone." Samuel nodded slowly. "After Mary died, I thought the same. Easier to need nothing, no one. But this ranch, these men, they taught me different. We survived together or not at all." That evening, Elena joined the communal dinner without being asked. The talk was of rebuilding, of which repairs to tackle first. When Billy complained about his struggles with a young stallion, Elena offered advice. When Miguel teased Tom about his cooking, she laughed along. "You should see this," Tom said suddenly, pointing out the window. The sunset was spectacular, painting the sand-scoured landscape in shades of rose and gold. But what caught Elena's attention was the sound coyotes, calling from the distant hills. Without thinking, she stepped onto the porch and answered them, throwing back her head in a haunting cry that raised goosebumps on the men's arms. The coyotes responded, and for several minutes, she sang with them, a wild, mournful conversation that spoke of loneliness and belonging, of freedom and family. When she finished, she found the men staring. Heat flooded her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I know it's strange." "Beautiful," Billy breathed, like nothing I ever heard. "Used to do that when I was alone," Elena said softly, "to remember I wasn't the only wild thing left." Samuel stepped beside her on the porch, close but not touching. "I understand," he said simply. And looking at him, this quiet man who'd lost everything and built it back, who offered freedom instead of cages, who held on when storms tried to tear you away. She believed he did. That night, she helped Miguel with the dishes while Tom told stories and Billy practiced his harmonica. Samuel worked on the ledgers, occasionally looking up to watch her laugh at something Miguel said. It was domestic, ordinary, and somehow more intimate than anything Elena had experienced. Later, unable to sleep, she found Samuel on the porch, watching the stars. "Can't sleep either," he asked. "Too much roof overhead still." She settled on the step below him. "During the storm, when we were in the barn, were you afraid?" "Terrified," he admitted. "Not of the storm so much as losing what we've built. Losing—" he paused. "Just losing." "I've been lost for 7 years," Elena said quietly. "Running, hiding, surviving, but not living. Here, these past weeks." She gestured at the ranch, the barn where horses nickered softly, the bunkhouse where good men slept. "It feels dangerous, wanting this." "Wanting what?" "A place, people who—" She struggled for words. "Who see me as more than something wild to be tamed or caged." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "You have that here, long as you want it." A coyote called in the distance, but this time Elena didn't answer. She was listening to something else. The creak of the windmill, the settling of the house, Samuel's steady breathing beside her, the sounds of a place that might, impossibly, become home. "The mare," she said suddenly. "The black one. I want to name her." "What'll you call her?" Elena thought of storms weathered and hands that held on, of freedom offered and trust slowly built. "Hope," she said. "I'll call her Hope." Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, and the ranch slept peacefully under their light. Tomorrow would bring more work, more small steps towards something neither quite dared name. But tonight, 2 wounded souls sat in comfortable silence, no longer quite so alone in the vast Texas night. The thunder of hoofbeats shattered the midnight quiet. Elena jerked awake, hand instinctively reaching for her knife. Through her window, she saw torches bobbing like fireflies, too many to count in the darkness. She dressed quickly, silently, then slipped through her door. Samuel was already on the porch, Colt .45 in hand, his face carved from stone in the flickering torchlight. Tom emerged from the bunkhouse with a rifle, followed by Miguel and Billy, both armed. "Hayes!" The voice boomed from beyond the torch circle. Jake Morrison, Bull's younger brother, sat his horse like a conquering general. "Got business with you." Elena counted at least 15 men, maybe 20, 3-to-1 odds, and that was being generous. Several wore bandanas over their faces, never a good sign. "State your business from there." Morrison. Samuel called evenly. Jake spat tobacco juice. "Come for what's ours. That wild woman you bought, she belongs with us." "Woman doesn't belong to anyone." Samuel replied, "Made that clear at the auction." "Clear or not, she's trouble. Folks in town are talking. Say she's a witch. Put a spell on you. Say she runs with wolves, speaks to demons." Jake's smile was ugly in the torchlight. "Now, you can hand her over peaceful-like, or we can take her. Your choice." Elena stepped from the shadows before Samuel could respond. "I'll make this simple," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "I'm not going anywhere with you." "There she is," one of the masked men shouted. "The she-devil herself." Jake leaned forward in his saddle. "You don't get a say, woman. You're coming with us one way or another. Boys here got plans for teaching you proper behavior." "Over my dead body," Samuel said quietly, but the threat in his voice was unmistakable. "That can be arranged," Jake replied. "You really want to die for some wild piece of trash?" The silence that followed was electric. Elena saw Samuel's jaw tighten, saw Tom and Miguel exchange glances. Billy, young as he was, shifted his weight like a fighter preparing to strike. "Here's what's going to happen," Samuel said finally. "You and your men are going to turn around and ride off my land. You're not going to come back. And if I hear of any of you within 10 miles of this ranch or Miss Elena, I'll take it personal." Jake laughed. "You and what army? Hayes, you got an old man, a Mex, and a green kid. We got 20 guns." 20 cowards hiding behind masks," Tom observed mildly. "Real brave." "Besides," Miguel added, "you assume we're all there as if on cue. The distinctive sound of multiple rifles being cocked echoed from the barn roof, the bunkhouse window, behind the water trough. Elena bit back a smile. Samuel had prepared for trouble. Posting men she hadn't even known were on the ranch. Jake's confidence wavered. "You're bluffing." "Try me," Samuel said simply. The moment stretched taut as wire. Elena could feel the violence hovering, waiting for one wrong word, one twitchy finger. Her hand found the knife at her belt, not to throw, but to be ready. If blood was shed tonight, she wouldn't let these good men face it alone. "She ain't worth it, Jake," one of the masked riders muttered. "Morrison said grab her if it was easy. This ain't easy." "Shut up," Jake snarled. But Elena heard the doubt creeping in. Bullies were brave when odds favored them. Less so when facing real resistance. "Tell you what," Samuel said, his voice reasonable. "You boys look tired. Long ride from town. Why don't you water your horses at the creek and think things over? Man makes better decisions when he's not parched." It was a face-saving out, and everyone knew it. Jake wrestled with his pride for a long moment before spitting again. "This ain't over. Hayes, that woman's nothing but trouble. When she shows her true nature, and she will, don't come crying to us." "Noted," Samuel said dryly. "Now get off my land." The riders wheeled their horses. Jake last of all, as they thundered away, their torches fading into the distance. Elena felt her knees go weak. She'd faced bears, wolves, storms, and starvation. But this men who saw her as property, as something less than human, this still had the power to shake her. "Everyone all right?" Samuel called. One by one. Ranch hands Elena hadn't even known were there emerged from their positions. 8 men total, not counting Tom, Miguel, and Billy. Samuel had hired extra protection without telling her. "Sorry to drag you boys into this." Samuel told them. "Hell, boss," one grizzled cowhand said. "Wouldn't miss it. Been too long since we run off trash like that." As the men dispersed, Elena found herself alone with Samuel on the porch. Her hands were shaking rage, not fear, and she clenched them to make it stop. "How long have the extra men been here?" she asked. "Since the day after the auction. Figured Morrison wouldn't let it go easy." He holstered his gun. "I'm sorry, you shouldn't have to face this." "I've faced worse," she said automatically, then softer. "But I've always faced it alone." Samuel turned to her then, and in the moonlight she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "You're not alone anymore. Not unless you choose to be." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither was ready to fully acknowledge. Elena thought of the men who'd stood ready to fight for her, of Samuel facing down 20 guns without flinching, of a belonging she'd never dared hope for. "They'll be back," she said quietly. "Maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. Men like that don't forget grudges." "Then we'll be ready." "I could leave, draw them away, keep the ranch safe." "No." The word was flat, final. "This ranch doesn't sacrifice its own for convenience. You're one of us now, if you want to be. We stand together or not at all." Elena felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. Crying was weakness, and weakness got you killed or worse. But these weren't tears of fear or sadness. This was something else. Something that felt dangerously like hope. "I don't know how to be what you think I am," she admitted. "Part of something, trusting people. 7 years in the wild. I learned to be a ghost, a shadow. This," she gestured at the ranch, at him. "This is harder than any storm." Samuel was quiet for a moment. "After Mary died, I went a little wild myself. Spent weeks in the hills, barely human. Tom found me, dragged me back. Took me months to remember how to be around people, to care about anything beyond the next sunrise." He paused. "What I'm saying is, nobody expects you to change overnight. Hell, I don't want you to change. Just stay. Figure out the rest as we go." A coyote howled in the distance, then another. Once, Elena would have answered, would have run toward that wild call. Now she found herself stepping closer to Samuel instead, drawn by something stronger than wildness. "Those men," she said, "they called me a witch, said I speak to demons. Do you?" She looked up at him, surprised. "You're not afraid of that talk? I've seen you with the horses, heard you sing with the coyotes. If that's witchcraft, the world could use more of it." His hand brushed hers, barely a touch. "You're no demon, Elena, just someone who learned to survive in ways most can't understand. And if they come back, if the whole town turns against you for harboring me." Samuel's smile was grim but determined. "Then I reckon we'll find out what this ranch is really made of. But I've got a feeling Jake Morrison's going to find other troubles to occupy him. Tom has friends in town, good people who don't take kindly to mobs and torches." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Elena thought about running, about the safety of solitude, the freedom of owing nothing to anyone. But stronger than that was the memory of Samuel's voice. "You're one of us now." "The black mare," she said suddenly. "Hope, I want to train her properly. Not break her, never that, but teach her to carry a rider who understands her." "Sounds like a fine idea." "And I want to learn to shoot. A rifle, like Tom carries. If trouble comes again, I'll teach you myself." Samuel promised. "Tomorrow, if you like." Elena nodded. Decision made. She wouldn't run. Not tonight. Not from these people who'd risked everything for her freedom. Whatever came next, Morrison's revenge. The town's judgment. Or something else entirely, she'd face it here. With this strange family she'd never sought but somehow found. "Thank you," she said simply. "For tonight, for everything." Samuel touched his hat, a gesture both formal and oddly intimate. "Get some rest. Dawn comes early, and we've got a ranch to run." As Elena returned to her room, she noticed her hands had stopped shaking. Through her window, she could see Samuel making rounds, checking on the men, ensuring all was secure. A protector, but not a jailer. A man who understood that sometimes the wildest things were the most worth saving. She locked her door from habit, not fear, and for the first time in 7 years, slept deeply without planning escape routes. Outside, the ranch settled into watchful quiet. And somewhere in the darkness, Hope the mare nickered softly, as if she too had found something worth staying for. Word spread through Willow Creek like wildfire on dry prairie. The wild woman at Triple Creek Ranch had bewitched Samuel Hayes. She spoke to animals, commanded storms, and practiced dark arts learned from Indians. With each telling, the story grew more fantastic, more dangerous. 2 weeks after Jake Morrison's midnight visit, a formal summons arrived. Judge Cornelius Blackwood would hold a town hearing to determine whether Elena posed a threat to the community. The largest warehouse in Willow Creek had been cleared for the occasion, half courthouse, half circus tent. "You don't have to go," Samuel said, reading the summons at the breakfast table. "This isn't a legal trial. Blackwood has no real authority to—" "If I don't go, they'll come here again," Elena interrupted. "More torches, more guns. Better to face them in daylight." Tom nodded approvingly. "Smart thinking. Besides, we'll all be there. Won't let you face those vultures alone." The morning of the hearing dawned clear and cold. Elena dressed carefully in her best dress, a simple blue calico Mary had once worn, altered by her own hands. She braided her hair properly, washed her face, and looked almost respectable. Almost. "You clean up nice," Billy said admiringly, then blushed when Miguel cuffed him. The ride to town felt both too long and too short. Elena sat beside Samuel on the wagon seat, back straight, chin high. Behind them, Tom, Miguel, and Billy rode escort, along with 6 other ranch hands. A show of force, but a peaceful one. Willow Creek's main street was packed. It seemed every soul for 50 miles had come to gawk at the wild woman. Elena felt their stares like physical touches, curious, hostile, fearful. A few women clutched their children closer as she passed. The warehouse was already full when they arrived. Judge Blackwood, a thin man with pretensions of Eastern sophistication, sat behind a makeshift bench. Jake Morrison stood to one side, flanked by several hard-looking men. The crowd buzzed like angry bees. "Order!" Blackwood banged a gavel. "We're here to determine whether the woman known as Elena poses a danger to our community. Mr. Morrison, state your case." Jake stepped forward, hat in hand, playing the concerned citizen. "Your Honor, this woman is a menace. She was caught stealing, sold at auction as a criminal. Now she's at Triple Creek, practicing unnatural acts. My brother Bull saw her talking to wolves. The widow Patterson heard her speaking in tongues. She's corrupted Samuel Hayes, turned him against his own kind." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Elena kept her face expressionless, though her hands clenched in her lap. "Furthermore," Jake continued, "she attacked my men when we went to reason with Hayes, pulled a knife, threatened violence. A decent woman doesn't act like that." "Any witnesses to this attack?" Blackwood asked. "My men, of course. The same men who came masked in the night." Samuel stood, his voice carrying clearly. 20 armed riders against a sleeping ranch, that the peaceful reasoning, you mean?" "You'll have your turn." "Hayes," Blackwood said curtly. Anyone else wish to speak against this woman? Several townspeople stood, repeating gossip and fear. She danced naked under the moon. She cast spells on cattle. She was seen transforming into a bird. Each accusation grew more absurd, but the crowd ate it up. Finally, Blackwood turned to Samuel. "Your defense." Samuel looked at Elena. "With your permission." She nodded, curious what defense he could offer against superstition and hatred. "Elena isn't on trial here." Samuel began. Fear is fear of anything different. Anyone who doesn't fit our narrow ideas of proper. Yes, she lived wild for years. Yes, she has ways that seem strange, but dangerous." He laughed shortly. "The only danger she poses is to our comfortable prejudices." "Pretty words." Jake sneered. "But they don't change what she is." "And what is she?" Samuel challenged. "A criminal. She was never convicted of anything, just accused. A witch. Because she has a way with animals that puts most of us to shame. Or is she dangerous simply because she survived what would have killed most of us?" Before anyone could respond, Elena stood. "May I speak?" The warehouse fell silent. Blackwood frowned, but nodded. Elena moved to the center of the space, every eye upon her. When she spoke, her accent was noticeable, but her words clear. "My name is Elena Rossi. My parents came from Italy when I was small, seeking the American dream. They found death instead. Fever took them when I was 12. I was alone, foreign, easy prey. Men took me, sold me, used me as they pleased." Her voice remained steady despite the painful memories. "I escaped, ran to the wilderness where at least the dangers were honest. For 7 years, I lived as the animals do, free, wild, alone." She paused, meeting various eyes in the crowd. "You call me witch because I learned to speak as horses speak, to sing with coyotes. You fear me because I survived without your civilization, your rules. But I've stolen nothing except my own freedom. Threatened no one who didn't threaten me first." An elderly woman near the back slowly stood. "I knew the Rossi family," she said, voice quavering but determined. "Good people. Came to my store every week until the fever took them. If this is their daughter..." She moved forward, studying Elena's face. "Yes, you have your mother's eyes. Child. Maria Rossi's eyes exactly." The crowd stirred uneasily. It was one thing to condemn a nameless wild woman, another to exile the orphaned daughter of remembered neighbors. Regardless of her past, Jake pressed. "She's still a danger?" Hayes, ask her about the knife. Ask her how many men she's killed in those 7 years. Samuel turned to Elena. Will you answer? Elena reached into her boot, drew out the knife. Several people gasped and pulled back. This blade has taken 3 lives, she said clearly. A rabid wolf that attacked me, a rattlesnake that struck without warning, and yes, a man. She met Jake's eyes steadily. A man who thought a lone woman in the wilderness was easy prey. He learned otherwise. You see, Jake crowed, she admits to murder. Self-defense isn't murder, Tom said loudly from his seat. Any one of us would do the same. Judge Blackwood cleared his throat. The question before us is simple. Is this woman a threat to Willow Creek, Miss Rossi? Do you intend harm to anyone in this town? I intend to work at Triple Creek Ranch, to train horses, mend fences, earn my keep. I intend to live peacefully, unless forced to defend myself. She looked directly at Jake. But I will defend myself. Always. She's threatening me, Jake protested. She's stating facts, Samuel corrected. Same as any person has a right to do. Blackwood pondered, aware the crowd's mood was shifting. The old woman's recognition had humanized Elena. Her calm dignity in the face of accusations had won some sympathy, and Samuel Hayes, despite his solitary ways, was respected in the community. My judgment, Blackwood announced finally, is that Miss Rossi has committed no crimes in Willow Creek. Her past, unusual though it may be, is her own affair. However, he raised a hand to quiet Jake's protest. If she causes actual harm, not gossip, not fear, but genuine harm, she'll face justice like anyone else. This is a mistake, Jake said darkly. When she shows her true nature, then we'll deal with facts, not fairy tales. Blackwood interrupted. As for you, Morrison, I'll remind you that gathering armed mobs is also against the law. Any further midnight visits to Triple Creek will be met with appropriate consequences. The judge banged his gavel. This hearing is concluded. As people filed out, Elena found herself surrounded by Samuel and the ranch hands, a protective circle against lingering hostile looks. But not everyone was hostile. The old woman who'd known her parents pressed a small wrapped package into Elena's hands. Your mother's rosary, she whispered. I kept it after. I thought perhaps someday. Tears filled her eyes. Welcome home, child. Elena clutched the package, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in her throat. Samuel's hand found her elbow, steady and sure. Let's go home, he said quietly. As they made their way to the wagon, Jake Morrison pushed close one last time. This isn't over, he hissed. That judge can say what he likes, but we know what you are, and when Hayes gets tired of his pet wild thing... He never finished. Elena moved so fast even Samuel barely saw it. One moment Jake was speaking. The next, he was on the ground, her knife pressed to his throat. I am not a pet, she said, each word precise as the blade's edge. Not a possession, not a thing. I am Elena Rossi, and you would do well to remember it. She stood smoothly, sheathed the knife, and climbed onto the wagon without looking back. Jake scrambled to his feet, face purple with rage and humiliation, but made no move to follow. As they rolled out of town, Elena unwrapped the old woman's gift with trembling fingers. The rosary was simple, worn smooth by her mother's hands. She held it to the light, remembering prayers in Italian, her mother's voice singing lullabies, a time before wildness and survival. You did well in there, Samuel said. Took courage to tell your story. They'll still fear me, still whisper their stories. Let them whisper. You've got nothing to prove to anyone. He paused. That was risky, though, putting Morrison on the ground. Elena fingered the rosary. Worth it to see his face. Samuel surprised her by laughing a rich, genuine sound. Miguel's going to be telling that story for years. The look in Morrison's eyes when you moved. like he'd grabbed a house cat and found a mountain lion. The sun was setting as they reached Triple Creek, painting the ranch in warm gold. The men dispersed to their duties, but Elena lingered on the porch, watching the familiar bustle of evening chores. "My mother would have liked this place," she said softly, still holding the rosary. She believed in America, in fresh starts. Even when things went bad, she kept believing. Samuel stood beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth in the cooling air. Maybe she was right to believe. Maybe it just took longer than expected. Elena looked up at him, this quiet man who'd bought her freedom and defended it, who offered belonging without demands. "Maybe," she agreed. That night, for the first time since childhood, Elena prayed, not for safety or escape, but in gratitude, for an old woman's kindness, for men who stood by her, for a judge who chose justice over fear, and for Samuel Hayes, who saw not a wild thing to be tamed, but a woman finding her way home. The days following the trial settled into a new rhythm at Triple Creek Ranch. Elena threw herself into learning everything Miguel taught her to braid leather riatas. Tom showed her how to read weather signs, and Billy, overcome with hero worship after her handling of Jake Morrison, followed her around like an eager puppy. "You're spoiling that boy," Tom observed one morning, watching Elena patiently correct Billy's stance with a rifle. "He's got stars in his eyes." "He's a good kid," Elena replied, adjusting Billy's grip. "Reminds me of my cousin Marco. Same eager heart." It was the first time she'd mentioned family beyond her parents. Samuel, repairing tackle nearby, noticed but didn't press. Elena would share her past in her own time. The breakthrough came unexpectedly through bread. Elena had volunteered to help Miguel with cooking duties, and the Mexican vaquero was teaching her to make tortillas. The smell of corn masa on the hot griddle must have triggered something deep, because suddenly she was crying silent tears rolling down her cheeks as her hands automatically shaped the dough. "Mi hija, what is it?" Miguel asked gently. "My grandmother," Elena whispered. "She taught me this when I was small, before we left Italy. I'd forgotten the smell." That evening, she made tortillas for the whole crew, along with a pot of beans seasoned with memory. As they ate, she found herself talking about her grandmother's garden in Tuscany, her father's dreams of American prosperity, the boat journey that seemed to last forever. "Papa was so certain," she said, staring into the fire. "Said in America, we could be anything, own land, build a future. He died still believing it." "Maybe he wasn't wrong," Samuel said quietly. "Just early." The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Elena was working with Hope when Tom called out, "Rider, moving fast!" Everyone tensed, hands drifting toward weapons, but the rider was a woman, young, dark-haired, riding like the devil was chasing her. She pulled up hard in the yard, horse lathered with sweat. "Please," she gasped. "I'm looking for—" "They said in town. Is there a woman named Elena here?" Elena stepped forward cautiously. "I'm Elena." The woman slid from her horse, took 2 steps, and collapsed. Samuel caught her before she hit the ground. Up close, Elena could see she was Mexican or maybe Spanish, pretty despite exhaustion and fear. "Bring her inside," Elena ordered, suddenly decisive. "Miguel, see to her horse. Billy, get water." They carried the woman to the house, laid her on the settee, as Elena bathed her face with cool water. The stranger's eyes fluttered open. "Elena Rossi," she whispered. "Yes, I'm Rosa Delgado. I was taken same time as you. From the Denver camp, you helped me escape. Remember, you fought them so I could run." Elena's hands stilled. The memories hit like physical blows the camp. The chains, the night she'd created a distraction so 3 younger girls could flee. She'd taken a beating for it, but they'd gotten away. "Rosa," she breathed. "Little Rosa." You were just a child? 15, Rosa corrected. Old enough to remember. You saved my life. When I heard in town about a wild woman at Triple Creek, how she spoke different, how she'd lived free, I hoped. Elena pulled the younger woman into a fierce embrace. You're safe now. How did you... Where have you been? A Mexican family found me. Took me in. I've been looking for you for years. And... Rosa pulled back, eyes uncertain. I've been looking for my sister, Maria Delgado. She was taken the same night as me. But from our farm, I thought maybe... Elena's heart sank. So many girls taken, so few ever found. I'm sorry, I don't know that name. But you'll stay here, rest. We'll help you search. Samuel had been standing quietly by the door. Now he stepped forward. Miss Delgado is welcome as long as she needs. Tom, could you set up the small room next to Elena's? As the men dispersed to make arrangements, Rosa caught Elena's hand. In town, they said terrible things about you, called you witch, said you were dangerous. Elena laughed, but it had an edge. I'm dangerous to men who steal girls in the night. Good, Rosa said fiercely. The world needs dangerous women. Over the following days, Rosa integrated into ranch life with surprising ease. She was educated, speaking both Spanish and English fluently, and had a gift with numbers that made her invaluable with the ledgers. But it was her connection to Elena that transformed the ranch's atmosphere. For the first time since arriving, Elena truly laughed. The two women would slip into rapid Spanish when excited, leaving the men bewildered. They shared memories both painful and precious, understanding flowing between them without need for words. She's different, Tom observed to Samuel one evening. Our Elena, more settled. Samuel nodded, watching Elena teach Rosa to throw a knife while both women giggled like schoolgirls. Having someone who understands your past changes things. Speaking from experience. Maybe. Samuel's eyes never left Elena. Maybe I am. The change showed in small ways. Elena began wearing her hair looser, sometimes even down. She hummed while working Italian folk songs her mother had sung. She still carried her knife, still moved with predator grace. But the constant wariness had eased. One evening, as the ranch settled into nighttime quiet, Rosa approached Samuel privately. I need to tell you something. About Elena, about what she did for us. Samuel listened as Rosa told the story, how Elena had endured extra abuse to help others escape, how she'd fought like a demon to buy them time, how she'd refused to break even when they tried to starve the wildness out of her. She saved 12 girls, one way or another, Rosa finished. Created diversions, taught us to fight, gave us hope. They called her La Loba, the wolf, said she'd bite before she'd submit. Why are you telling me this? Rosa studied him with knowing eyes. Because you look at her like she hung the moon. Because she looks at you when she thinks no one sees. And because you should know Elena doesn't know how to be loved gently. Everyone who ever said they cared for her wanted to cage her. Except you. Before Samuel could respond, Rosa was gone, leaving him alone with thoughts that chased themselves in circles. The next morning brought unexpected joy. Billy came running from town with mail, including a letter for Rosa. Her hands shook as she opened it. Read, then screamed with joy. My sister, she's alive. She's in San Antonio, working for a good family. They helped her write to the old addresses, hoping... She clutched the letter to her chest. She's alive? The ranch erupted in celebration. Miguel produced a hidden bottle of good whiskey. Tom played his fiddle. And even Samuel allowed himself to be dragged into an impromptu dance with Rosa. But it was Elena who drew his eyes standing apart, watching with a smile that mixed joy and sadness. He understood. Rosa would leave now, go to her sister. Another goodbye, another person moving on. He found her later by the corral, Hope nuzzling her shoulder. You did a good thing, he said, saving her back then. I did what anyone would do. No, most would have saved themselves. You chose differently. Elena stroked Hope's neck, quiet for a long moment. She'll leave soon. Find her sister. Start a new life. It's good, right? You'll miss her. I've gotten used to missing people. She turned to face him. But yes, having her here, someone who knew that girl I was, who understood. I'd forgotten what it felt like not to explain yourself. Samuel stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. You don't have to explain yourself here. Not to me, not ever. Don't I? Her voice was soft, uncertain. Sometimes I catch you watching me, and I wonder what you see. The wild woman who talks to horses, the danger everyone warns about, or just another broken thing you're trying to fix. You want to know what I see? Samuel's voice roughened. I see a woman who survived hell and kept her soul, who saves others even when it costs her, who brings life back to places that forgot how to live. He paused. I see the woman who's teaching me to hope again. Elena's breath caught. Samuel! I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. Not trying to cage you or change you, just wanted you to know what I see. She reached up, touched his face with wondering fingers. You impossible man, don't you know you already changed me? The moment you said your choice and meant it. Later, as the celebration continued inside, Elena found herself sitting with Rosa under the stars. Tomorrow, they'd start planning the journey to San Antonio. But tonight, they had this friendship forged in darkness, renewed in light. He loves you, Rosa said simply. That rancher of yours. I know, Elena admitted. It terrifies me. Good terror or bad terror? Elena thought of Samuel's steady presence, his quiet strength, the way he created space for her wildness instead of trying to contain it. Good, she decided. The kind of terror that comes before flying. Rosa squeezed her hand. Then fly. La Loba. You taught me to be brave, time you remembered your own lessons. Above them, the stars wheeled in their eternal dance, and somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called. This time, Elena didn't answer. She was listening to something else, the sound of her own heart, learning to trust its rhythm. Winter arrived with a vengeance that year, sweeping down from the northern mountains like an angry god. Rosa had left for San Antonio in the fall, tearful but joyful, promising to write. Her absence left a quietness in Elena that even the ranch's warm bustle couldn't quite fill. The first blizzard hit in late December. Elena had seen snow in the mountains during her wild years, but nothing like this, a white wall that swallowed the world, driven by winds that screamed like living things. Going to be a bad one, Tom predicted, watching the sky turn the color of old pewter. Seen that look before, in '76. Lost half the herd that year. Samuel immediately organized the men. They drove the cattle into the most sheltered valley, reinforced the barn, stocked the bunkhouse with extra wood and supplies. Eliana worked alongside them, her wilderness instincts proving invaluable. The horses are spooked, she told Samuel as they secured the barn doors. Something beyond the storm. We should bring them all in, even the ones usually fine outside. He didn't question her judgment. By nightfall, every animal was sheltered, and none too soon. The blizzard struck like a physical blow, turning the familiar ranch into an alien landscape of howling white. For 3 days, they were trapped. The men made it to the barn for feeding by rope lines, but beyond that, movement was impossible. Elena found herself pacing the house like the caged thing she'd sworn never to be again. You'll wear a groove in the floor, Samuel observed from where he worked on harness repairs. I hate this, she admitted. The walls, the ceiling pressing down, knowing I couldn't run if I needed to. But you don't need to run, he said gently. Do you? She stopped pacing, really looked at him. Sometime in the past months, he'd become her fixed point, her true north. When had that happened? When had safety stopped meaning solitude and started meaning Samuel? On the fourth day, the storm broke but left behind a world transformed. Drifts reached the roof in places. The normal landmarks were buried, erased. That's when they realized the real danger. Cattle broke through the valley fence, Billy reported. Ice in his hair from just the short trip to the barn. Probably when that big drift collapsed. They're scattered, and more weather's coming. Samuel's face went grim. Cattle lost in this weather meant dead cattle, and dead cattle meant a failed ranch, bankruptcy, the end of everything they'd built. How many, he asked. Maybe 30 head, could be more. I'll go, Samuel said immediately. Tom, you and Miguel take the north section. Billy. I'm going with you, Elena interrupted. No. The word came out harsher than he intended. It's too dangerous. This isn't like tracking deer in the forest. This is exactly like tracking in the forest. She countered, except I know how to read snow, how to think like a frightened animal. You need me. They stared at each other, wills clashing. Then Samuel saw what the others had already noticed. Elena wasn't asking permission. She was stating fact. Fine, he said. But we rope ourselves together. No heroics. They set out at first light, the world eerily beautiful in its deadliness. The snow was hip-deep in places, and the wind cut like knives. But Elena was in her element, reading signs invisible to the others, a broken branch here, a drift disturbed there. This way, she said, pointing toward a grove of cottonwoods. They'd seek shelter, but not too deep. Cattle aren't smart about snow. She was right. They found the first group huddled against the trees, already starting to freeze. The journey back was nightmarish, driving confused cattle through deep snow while more weather pressed in from the north. They'd just gotten that group to safety when the second wave hit. This wasn't a blizzard, but an ice storm, coating everything in a crystalline shell that turned beautiful and lethal. There's more out there, Billy said desperately. At least 20 head, maybe more. Samuel looked at the exhausted men, the ice already forming on every surface. We can't. Not in this. The hell we can't. Elena said, You told me once this ranch survives because we protect what's ours. All of what's ours. Not just what's easy. It was his own words thrown back at him from that night with the chickens. Samuel wanted to argue, wanted to lock her inside where she'd be safe. But that wasn't who she was. More importantly, it wasn't who they were together. All right, he said. One more run. This time, it was just Samuel and Elena. The others were too exhausted, and someone needed to stay with the animals already rescued. They roped themselves together and headed into the white hell. The ice storm had turned the world into glass. Every step was treacherous. Elena's wilderness skills were all that kept them oriented as they searched. Finally, she stopped. Listen, she said. Faint, almost lost in the wind, the low groaning of cattle in distress. They found them in a draw. 23 head trapped by drifts and weakening fast, working together with desperate efficiency. They began breaking a path. Elena used her knife to cut ice from the led steer's eyes, while Samuel worked to clear the deepest drifts. They'd gotten half the herd moving when Samuel's foot found a patch of ice hidden under snow. He went down hard, and Elena heard the crack even over the wind. My leg, he gasped. Think it's broken. For one moment, Elena felt the old panic, the need to run, to save herself. Then she looked at Samuel, this man who'd given her choice and freedom and home, and the panic transformed into something else. Fierce determination. Get up, she ordered. Lean on me. Can't. You need to go. Get help. I said get up. Her voice brooked no argument. We go together or not at all. Your words. Remember. Somehow, they managed. Elena half-carried Samuel while still driving the cattle, using every trick learned in 7 years of survival. When his strength flagged, she bullied him forward. When her own body screamed for rest, she remembered his hands holding on during the sandstorm. They made it back as full darkness fell, Elena practically dragging Samuel the last 100 yards while the rescued cattle stumbled into the safety of the holding pen. Tom and Miguel rushed out, taking Samuel's weight. "His leg," Elena gasped. "Broke it on the ice." They carried him inside while Billy saw to the cattle. Elena collapsed on the porch steps, too exhausted to move. Every part of her hurt. But they'd done it. They'd saved the herd. "Elena," Tom called. "He's asking for you." She found Samuel on the settee, legs splinted, face gray with pain but eyes alert. "You saved us," he said. "The ranch, the cattle, me." "You would have done the same." "Maybe, but I couldn't have, not without you." He caught her hand, held it despite the pain. "In the storm, when I fell. I thought about dying out there, and the only regret I had was not telling you." "Telling me what?" "That I love you." The words came out simple, honest, without flourish. "Have for months, maybe since that first day, when you stood on that auction platform refusing to be broken. I love your strength, your wildness, the way you sing to horses and argue with the wind. I love." Elena stopped his words with a kiss. It was awkward, him lying down, her kneeling beside the settee, both of them battered and exhausted. But it was also perfect, tasting of snow and survival and promises too deep for words. When they broke apart, she was crying. "I can't be tamed," she whispered. "Can't be caged or changed or made into something I'm not." "Good," Samuel said firmly. "I don't want you tamed. Want you just like this, wild and free and choosing to stay." "Then I choose you." Elena said, "Choose this ranch, this life. Choose to stay, not because I have to, but because I want to. Because somewhere between that auction platform and this moment, you became my home." "Marry me," Samuel said. "Not to own you, never that, but to stand beside you, to face whatever comes together, to give you my name if you want it, or just my heart if you don't." Elena thought of her mother's rosary, of Rosa's words about flying, of a future that suddenly seemed bright with possibility. "Yes," she said, "but I keep my knife." Samuel laughed, then winced as it jarred his leg. "I'd worry if you didn't." Outside, the ice storm continued its assault on the Texas plains. But inside the ranch house, two battered souls found warmth in each other, building something stronger than any storm could break. Miguel, peering in to check on his boss, found them asleep. Elena curled in a chair beside the settee, their hands linked even in exhaustion. He smiled and quietly closed the door. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But tonight, love had conquered winter itself. The storm broke 3 days later, leaving behind a world scoured clean and sparkling. Samuel's leg healed slowly but well, and when spring finally came to Triple Creek Ranch, it brought with it the promise of new beginnings and a wedding beneath the cottonwood trees. Spring arrived at Triple Creek Ranch in a burst of wildflowers and bird songs. The cottonwoods unfurled their leaves, and the air carried the scent of new grass and possibility. Elena Hayes, for she had taken Samuel's name while keeping her own fierce spirit, stood on the porch, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. 3 years had passed since that winter storm. 3 years since she'd chosen love over loneliness. The wedding had been simple, held beneath the very cottonwoods where she now stood. Rosa had returned from San Antonio to stand as her witness. Tom had given her away with tears in his eyes, and even the townspeople of Willow Creek had come to celebrate the union of their quiet rancher and his wild bride. "You're up early," Samuel said, joining her with 2 cups of coffee. His limp from the broken leg was barely noticeable now, just a slight favoring when the weather changed. "The mares are restless," Elena replied, accepting the cup gratefully. "Storm coming, maybe tomorrow." Samuel didn't question her weather sense any more than he questioned her ability to gentle the wildest horses, or her habit of keeping her knife always within reach. These things were part of her, and he loved every part. "Billy wants to know if you'll help him with that new stallion today," he said. "Says you're the only one who can make sense of him." Elena smiled. Billy had grown into a fine horseman under her tutelage, but he still sought her approval like an eager younger brother. "After I check on Hope, she's close to foaling." Hope, her black mare, had become the foundation of their breeding program, crossed with Samuel's best stallion. She'd produced foals that carried both speed and intelligence, horses that seemed to understand human partnership rather than submission. The ranch had prospered in these 3 years. Word had spread about the Triple Creek horses, trained by methods that preserved their spirit while creating willing partners. Buyers came from as far as California, seeking the Hayes horses that bore Elena's touch. "Mrs. Henderson sent word," Samuel said casually. "Wants to know if you'll teach her daughter to ride. Says the girl's too spirited for normal instruction." Elena laughed. "Too spirited? Once that would have meant auction blocks and chains." "Times change," Samuel said softly. "People learn." It was true. Willow Creek had gradually accepted Elena, won over by her dignity, her hard work, and the obvious devotion between her and Samuel. The whispers of wild woman had faded, replaced by respectful nods and requests for her horse wisdom. Even Jake Morrison kept his distance, his power diminished by the town's shifting attitudes, as if summoned by her thoughts. Tom appeared from the barn. "Riders coming? Looks like... Well, I'll be damned. It's Rosa." Rosa Delgado, now Rosa Martinez, married to a merchant in San Antonio, arrived in a whirlwind of laughter and tears. With her was her sister Maria, and, surprisingly, an older woman who made Elena's heart stop. "This is Senora Giovanna Romano," Rosa said carefully. "She came to our shop asking about Italian families who disappeared. Elena, she says she might be your father's sister." The woman stepped forward, studying Elena with eyes achingly familiar. "Pietro Rossi was my brother," she said in accented English. "We lost touch when he came to America. I've been searching for 20 years. Elena felt Samuel's steadying hand on her back as memories flooded through her father's stories about a sister in New Orleans, the aunt who'd opposed his American dreams, family torn apart by an ocean and ambition. "Sia Giovanna," she whispered, using the childhood word for aunt. The woman's composure cracked. "Mia cara Elena, my dear one, I thought you were lost forever." The reunion was tearful, joyful, complicated. Giovanna had prospered in New Orleans. Building a successful boarding house, she'd never stopped searching for her brother's family, following trails that led nowhere until Rosa's chance encounter. "You must come visit," Giovanna insisted. "See where your father's people have made their mark. You have cousins, Elena, family who will want to know you." Once the idea of leaving the ranch would have terrified Elena, brought back memories of running and hiding. But now, with Samuel beside her and a home to return to, the world seemed full of possibility rather than threat. That evening, the ranch hosted a celebration. Miguel cooked a feast that blended Mexican, Italian, and American traditions. Tom played his fiddle while Billy attempted to dance with Maria, who laughed at his earnest clumsiness. Even the horses seemed to sense the joy, whinnying from the corrals as if adding their voices to the party. Elena found herself watching it all with wonder. This place that had begun as a refuge had become so much more. The bunkhouse rang with laughter from men who'd become family. The main house, once marked by a widower's grief, now held warmth and life, and everywhere, the signs of growth, new foals in the pasture, expanded corrals, a vegetable garden she'd planted with herbs her mother once grew. "No regrets?" Samuel asked, finding her in a quiet moment. "How could I regret this?" She gestured at the celebration, at the life they'd built. "Do you know what you gave me that day at the auction?" "Freedom." "Choice," she corrected. "The freedom to choose my own cage, only to discover it wasn't a cage at all. It was wings." As the evening wound down, Elena stepped onto the porch. Drawn by the sound of coyotes in the hills, the old wildness stirred in her, the part that would always belong more to wind and stars than walls and roofs. But now it didn't pull her away. It simply reminded her of who she was. She began to sing, that haunting melody that had once been her only companion. But this time, other voices joined her: Samuel's steady baritone, Rosa's sweet soprano, even Tom's gravelly harmony. The coyotes answered, and for a moment, all boundaries dissolved between human and wild, between past and present, between the girl who'd survived alone and the woman who'd chosen to belong. Elena Hayes was no longer the wild woman no man could tame. She hadn't been tamed, she'd been seen, accepted, loved for exactly who she was. Her knife still rested in her boot. Her horses still came to her call, and her spirit remained as free as the Texas wind. The only difference was that now, when she rode across the endless prairie with her hair streaming behind her, she rode toward home instead of away from it. "The townspeople used to say I rode straight into your heart," she told Samuel as the stars emerged overhead. "But the truth is, you rode into mine the moment you said those 2 words." "What words?" "Your choice." He pulled her close. This man who understood that love wasn't about possession, but about creating space for another's soul to flourish. "Still is," he said. "Always will be." In the distance, hope whinnied, calling her foal to her side. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, storms to weather, horses to train, a ranch to run, perhaps a visit to New Orleans to meet family she'd never dreamed of finding. But tonight, surrounded by chosen family and unexpected joy, Elena Hayes stood free and whole under the vast Texas sky. The wild girl who'd once stood in chains on an auction platform had become something no one could have imagined, not tamed, but partnered, not broken, but unbreakable, not caged, but finally, truly home. Some said Samuel Hayes had done the impossible, taming the wild woman. But those who knew better, who'd seen them ride together across the plains, who'd watched them work side by side, who'd witnessed the fierce tenderness between them, they knew the truth. Love hadn't tamed Elena's wildness. It had given it a place to grow, flourish, and transform into something even more powerful, a force that turned a lonely ranch into a home, strangers into family, and 2 broken hearts into one unbreakable whole. Under the endless Texas stars, the coyotes sang their ancient songs, and Elena Hayes sang with them, wild, free, and finally home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Dear listeners, I hope Elena and Samuel's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine to tell it. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening to this tale of wild hearts and chosen homes. Please share in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more stories of love, courage, and adventure from the American frontier. What did you think of Elena's transformation from the wild girl to finding her true home? Share your thoughts. I read every comment and love connecting with fellow lovers of Western romance.